Hello, young economists and pocket money planners. Welcome to our cozy corner of the internet where your change counts and your dollars make a difference. Today, we are embarking on a whimsical journey to build your own expense tracker. It's like crafting a treasure map that leads to the golden land of smart savings. Wave goodbye to those sneaky expenses that slip through the cracks because we are about to build a trusty tool that will make every coin count. With a sprinkle of creativity and a dash of code, we'll turn this digital canvas into a masterpiece that watches over your wallet. I am here to take you on an exciting journey through the digital landscape of your very own expense tracker. Imagine if you had a superpower that allowed you to see exactly where your money goes down the last time. Well, guess what? You don't need to imagine anymore. In today's video, we are going to unravel the magic behind creating an expense tracker that's not only fun to use but also keeps your budget on track. So, whether you are saving up for that dream skateboard or just trying to manage your weekly allowance, I've got your back. We'll explore every line of code together, turning numbers and notes into a masterpiece of money management. Stay tuned, click that like button, hit subscribe, and let's jump right into the world of smart spending with a do-it-yourself expense tracker. And just a quick info for you guys, if you are a professional who wants to switch careers with software engineering by learning from the experts, then try giving a shot to Simplilearn's postgraduate program in full stack web development. Accelerate your career as a software developer through this postgraduate program in full stack web development course in collaboration with Caltech CTME. In just a few months, you will learn modern coding techniques with bootcamp level intensity and gain all you need to be a full stack technologist. The course link is mentioned in the description box below and pinned comment. So without any further ado, let's get started. So guys, let's start with the expense tracker. So first we'll see the output, exactly what we are going to make. So for that, we'll open the projects, that is expense tracker 2. So this is a project and let's make it live. So this is our expense tracker and has some balance in it. So these are the transactions, now it's free and you could enter anything that would be the transaction subject as transport, and in this I paid the amount, so I will write in the amount deducted and that would be around 30, and it has set the current balance as minus $30 and in the amount deducted $30, and you could see the transactions that is in expense and we have made it in the red section. So if you want to say you have credit your salary and that would be $30,000. Okay, so you want to add the transaction, it has added and the income has added, and now the current balance is $29,970. So this is our expense tracker. So let's start making this and close this. So first let's create a folder for this, and we'll create a folder, we'll name it here. Okay, so inside we'll create one more folder and name it as expense tracker. And don't worry guys, I will copy paste the code for you in the description box so you could easily access it. Until then, our folder is ready. Now we'll open the command prompt and open the Visual Studio Code. So you could use any that is ID. I will be using the Visual Studio Code as I have been using it since a great time. So you can use anyone that you have hands on. So let's start guys. So you have seen the output and now we will start creating the index file, that would be index.html file. So you could also integrate the extensions here. That would be the go live server, and you could only click here and it will automatically open the page in the browser. Else you can just save it and open it in any browser. So here we'll start the HTML, and starting with doc type HTML, and this tells the web browser that we are using HTML5, so the latest standard for HTML. And after that we'll write HTML equal to en. Okay, and here we begin our HTML document and specify that we'll be using English. So for that we have written this syntax. And now moving to head, we'll open the head tag, and here we'll set the meta character set. That would be to ensure our page uses the universal character set, which includes most characters from all known languages. So for that we'll write meta char set, and that would be UTF-8. Okay, and after that we'll set the meta name equal to viewport, and we'll set the content and device width also, and we'll set the initial scale. So this will help our page look good on all devices, whether it's a phone, tablet or computer. So for that we'll write here, that would be meta name equal to viewport, and after that content equal to so the content would be width equal to, so I'll just increase the size of this also so you guys could easily see. Okay, so I think now the size is fine. Okay, so now moving on, what we are doing, we are setting the width. So width would be equal to the device width, so it will be compatible with any device. And after that we'll set the initial scale, and that would be equal to 1.0. Okay, and we'll close this. Now moving on, we'll set the meta HTTP equivalent. So this is for older Internet Explorer browsers to render the page using the highest mode available. So we'll set this, so if someone is opening in the older internet browser, so he could also access this page. So for that we'll write meta HTTP equivalent equal to minus UA compatible and content equal to I equal to H. And now we'll set the style sheet. That would be, we will link a CSS file and we'll name it at style.css, which is like the clothing for a page, so it will make everything look nice. So for that, first we'll create the file and name it at style.css. Okay, and in the index.html, here we will just paste the link for it. That would be for the style sheet. So for that we'll write Okay. .css. Okay. And now moving on, we'll set the title. And we'll set the title as expense tracker only. So if you want all in caps, you could do that, or else you could use the running one. So here we'll close the head and we'll start with the body. So if you guys want, you could use the go live option and see the progress simultaneously. So we have just written the head, that is expense tracker. So it's here. Now moving back, we'll start with the body. And here in the center tag, we will add the heading and we'll use the h2 tag for the expense tracker. Okay. Now, so you could see the progress simultaneously and expense tracker is here. Now moving back, we will start a div here. So I put the title and expense tracker in the center of the page so everyone knows what this page is about. Now we'll create a div and we'll name the class as container only. Think of this as a big box that holds all the parts of our expense tracker. So we are creating this div for the purpose. Now moving back, we'll create the div class and name it as container. Okay. And inside we'll use the h4 tag for the current balance. As you have seen the output, so we'll make the same output only, and here it would be the current balance. We could just make it in the same line only. It need not to be in this indentation. It could work on that also and in this also. Now we'll use the h1 tag and give it an id that would be balance. So it would be the current balance. Okay. And currently we'll set it as $0.0. Okay. So now in this div only, as this is the main container, we will create another div. So for the current balance, the h4 heading, so this is a smaller title that tells us next number is our current balance. And then we use the h1 tag. This is where we see how much money we have starting, and we will start it at $0.0. Then we see two sections. We'll create the two sections side by side inside div only and name the class. We'll see like what we'll name it. And so in the first div, we will make the amount credited. So where we will see how much money we got. And in the second div, we will make the money minus, or to show how much money we spent. So let's create that. So here we'll create another div and name the class as that would be increase exponential container, or you could name anything. I would be naming this, and inside we'll create one more div. And inside we'll use the H for heading, and that would be for amount credited. Okay, and inside this only we'll have a paragraph tag, and we'll give it an ID. That would be money plus. Okay, and we'll have a class here and make it as money plus only. So what it will do, it will add it, so we'll make that. Okay, here we have closed the paragraph tag, then the div tag, and another div tag. So this is one of the div for the amount credited, and similarly we'll create another div for amount deducted. So let's create another div, and this would be for the amount deducted. So we'll create an h4 tag, and here we'll write amount deducted. Okay, simultaneously I will show you guys what we are making. So you could see the current balance, and that we have set it to $0.0, and we have set amount credited that we have made, and now we are making amount deducted. Okay, similarly, so okay, amount deducted, and in this we'll also use the paragraph tag and give it an ID, and we'll name the ID as money minus. Okay, and we'll name the class here, that would be money minus, and set it as minus $0.0. Okay, so it's done, and this div is closed. Now, so let's see what we have to create. So this is our expense tracker that we'll be creating, and this is what we have made till now. So you could see that we have set the current balance, amount credited, amount deducted, and now we'll set add new transaction. So we are creating the HTML file. Here we'll just structure it, we'll add all the fields here, and after that using the CSS we will modify it and make the color blue and have these boxes or the cards, and using the JavaScript we will add the functionality. So let's first complete the HTML file. So we have closed the div here, and now let's see, we'll start with the add new transaction. Okay, we'll create this now. So moving back, we'll use h3 tag, heading 3, and write add new transaction. Okay, h3 tag is closed. Now we'll open a form here and give it an ID, and we'll give it the ID form only. Now inside we'll create a div, and to the class we'll name it as form control, and inside this div we will add a label, that would be label 4, and that would be text only. We'll set the transaction subject. So what transaction you want, so you could add in the transaction subject. So you could see here that we have added the add new transaction and then the transaction subject. Okay, moving back, we have created this label, and for this label we'll add the input type. Okay, so for this input type would be text, and we'll give the ID that would be text, and we'll have a placeholder. So placeholder will work, that would be, we'll just write enter text, and it would be showing the persons that you have to enter text here. Sorry. So enter text, or we could just write enter the transaction subject. Okay, and we'll close this tag, and now we'll go and see. Once you could see that here is the label, that is transaction subject, and here is its input type. Similarly, we will create amount credited and amount deducted. So going back, here the div is closed, and we'll create another div, and this would be in the form only. So here we'll create another div that would be for the amount credited. So inside this div we will give it a class and name it as form control only, and we'll create a label here. So label 4, we'll write income text. Okay, and inside we'll write amount credited, and here the label is closed. And then we'll have the input type here, and for the form of number, as this is the amount credited, and we'll give a ID here, and we'll name the ID as income text only. Okay, you could give any, and then we'll have a placeholder, and here we can write enter the amount credited, okay, and here we'll close this tag. So you could see that the div is closed here, and this is this div. Okay, so let's see here what we have created. We have created the amount credited, and similarly we will create for amount debited. So we'll copy paste it, and here in this we have created another div, and then class we have named it form control only, and instead of income text we will write here expense text and amount deducted. And now coming to the input type, so it would be number only, and we'll change the ID. That would be expense text, and for the placeholder we will write enter expense amount or enter deducted amount or enter amount deducted. So it's done. Let's see. So you could see that it has added the 3 labels and the 3 input types. So now moving back, what we'll create here now is transactions. So it will be the transactions history, and then we'll create the add transaction button. So let's get back to our ID. So this will also be in this form only, and after this div we will have h3 tag, and that will write transactions, and in the we'll create a unordered list here. Okay, so we'll create an unordered list and we'll give it an ID and give this ID name, that would be list, and a class, and name the class also as list. So this h3 tag in these transactions, so this will be a list of all the transactions we have credited or debited. Now we are creating the unordered list, so it would be like the treasure chest where we'll keep all the transactions recorded. So class equal to list, we have closed the unordered list, but before that, to create the treasure chest, we'll add some functionality to it. So for this we'll have, and inside we'll have a lie, and we'll have a class here and name it as minus. So if you want to extract any transactions or if you want to cancel any transactions, so you can do it from here, and for that we are adding the functionality. We'll create a span here. So I'll write minus $400 and close the span, and now we'll create a button and have a class, name it as delete button. Okay, close this. And place that will be the X symbol on which we'll click, and the transactions will be deducted from there, that will be removed from there. And now we'll close the button. So we have closed the button tag, and now we'll close the li tag, and the unordered list tag is closed here. Now going back, and you could see the transactions here. As you'll add the transactions, it would be displayed here, and if you want to cancel the transactions, you could just click on the X. That would be, if you hover it, you will go to the X button. If you click on that transactions will be gone. So now we'll add the button, that will be the add transactions. So let's get back to the ID. So after unordered list, we will add a button. So we'll have a class and name it as button, and the button So button will be displayed with add transaction. So we have created the button for the functionality. We'll add the functionality in the JavaScript file. So we will create, like, close the form. Oh, we have one. So here we will close the form. Okay, and then we have the div tag, that is the main container tag, that has been closed. And now the body is closed and the HTML is closed. So now we'll move to the CSS file, and here we'll create a JavaScript file also now only, script.js. okay, and we'll add this file in HTML also. So like after the div tag we can add it, and for that we could write script src, that is script source, equal to script.js and we have closed the script tag. Okay, so this is our HTML file. Now we'll design this. So let's move and create the CSS file. So let's create the CSS file, and first we'll import two fonts, that would be Leto and Open Sans from Google Fonts. It's like choosing two different styles of handwriting for a web page. So for that we'll write @import URL, and inside this we'll paste the URL for that, and I have that URL. Let's see where it is. So you could use any URL. So I have the link here, so I'll paste it. So this is the URL for the fonts. Now we'll create a route. So this would be like setting up a box of crayons with specific colors that you can use throughout your coloring book or the web page. So let's create a route here. Okay, so I have to close it. Coming back, here's our root, and inside this root we will create the variable name and then the color for them. So that will define a color that you can use later by just mentioning its name. So I'll show you guys how I will do that. So that would be minus minus. So for a box shadow, write 0, and that would be 1 pixel and 3 pixel, and be RGBA inside, right, comma 0 comma 1 2. Okay, 0 1 pixel, 2 pixel, and RGBA, that would be 0, 0, 0.24. so these are the coding numbers. So you could just have them or search on the web, and you could define it for your like shadows, colors, and for what you want to use. So now we'll set the primary color for our expense tracker. Okay, so the primary color we'll set it as blue. Okay, calming blue. So here we will write the code for the blue color, that is 349. As I already remember the color codes, you could just see on the web and use them. Now for the secondary color, so secondary color, that would be subtle gray. So for that we'll write the code E7 E7 E7. Okay, and then we'll have the accent color. So accent color will define as red. So for that we'll write E7 4C 3C. And then we have hover color. If someone hovers, that would be hash 2980 B9. So that would be the hover state color. And then for the background of income, we'll define a green background for it. Okay, so for that we'll write the code. That would be D FF0D8, and then we'll have the expense background. And for that we'll write the code. Then F2 DEDE. So this is the light red background for expenses, and then we'll have the section background. So for that we'll define the color. That would be the light background for sections. So for that we have F9 F9 F9. Okay, and we have to close all these. Okay, so we have defined the root here, and now moving on, we will have the box sizing. So here we'll tell every element in our web page to include the padding and border in the element's total width and height, making it easier to size things. So for that we'll write the syntax star, and here we'll write the box sizing. And we'll set the border box. Okay, and after that we will and now we'll set the entire color for the we'll set the background color for our entire page, and we'll choose the Open Sans font for all the text. So it's like picking a paper color and deciding what pen to use for writing. So for that, in the body, first we'll set the background color, and that we'll set as white only. So for that we'll write the code hashtag F4 F4 F4. So and now we'll set the font family. So we'll set the font family for the whole body. For that we'll write font family, and inside we'll write Open Sans, and we can write use this font. Okay, and we'll set the color hash gray. Okay, and now we'll go for the container. So this will style a box or div on a page to have a maximum width of, we'll set the maximum width of 600 pixels that would be centered with the margin and padding around it. So it's like drawing a rectangle in the middle of a paper for main picture. Okay, so for that we'll have the styles of the container. First we'll set the max width, and that would be 600 pixels, and we'll set the margin, that would be 20 pixels, and that would be auto for it. And then we'll have the padding, that would be 20 pixels. Okay, so after setting the container, we will set the color and margin for the headings. That would be, we have used heading tags, so we have used h1, h2, h3, h4 or any tags. So for that we will write h1, h2, h3, h4, and for these we'll set the margin as 10 pixels, and font weight we'll set as bold only. Okay, so now we'll set the transaction card styling. So the list we have created li, so for that we'll write the css, so dot list li. So first we'll set the background color. So this part will style each item in your list li, and they look like cards with rounded corners that will make a shadow to make them pop off of the page. And there will be a special left border that changes color depending on the type of transactions. So for that we'll write the css. So first we'll set the background color, so we'll set the variable background color for that, and we'll set the section background. Okay, and then we'll set the border radius, that would be 8 pixels, and then we'll set the box shadow, and set the variable box shadow, and then we'll set the left border, that would be 5 pixels, and solid variable, and we'll set it as primary color. Here we'll use these that we have set in the starting. So we'll set the margin from bottom, and we'll set it as 10 pixels. Okay, and now we'll set the padding, and padding also 10 pixels. And now we'll have the list style type and the transition. So no, we won't add it, so none for it. And then we have the transition. So transition will set transform, and that would be 0.3 seconds, and that would be at ease. Okay, so we have set it for list, and now we'll set for list li plus, li minus. So these lines give different background colors to the list items, that is cards, depending on whether they are adding or subtracting. So for them, if it's adding, so list li dot plus, we'll set the background color, and that would be table minus expense background. Okay, and now for li plus we'll set as income background. Okay, and for the minus, we'll set the background color, that will be expense background, what we have set earlier, and we'll set the border left corner also, b minus minus, we have set the accent color. Okay, and now we'll set the for hover also, that would be, this will make each list item slightly bigger when you hover your mouse over it, so giving it a neat interactive effect. And I hover, and for this we have transform, and we'll set the scale as 1.03 only. Okay, it would be sufficient for that. And now we'll add the CSS for button and interactive elements. So these styles are for the buttons on your page, and they get a nice background color, rounded corners, and will change color when you hover over them. So for that we'll write node button and delete button. So first we'll set the background color, and we'll set as table and the primary color. Okay, for the button we'll set the color as white only, and then we'll set the border padding, so border would be none. So for padding, we'll set the padding as 10 pixels, and border radius, so those would be rounded. We'll set the border radius as 5 pixels, and then we'll set the cursor, and set the cursor as pointer. Okay, and then we have the transition, and set it as background color, and set the transition at 0.3 ease. Okay, so these we have set it for buttons, and now we can set it for button hovers also. So now we'll add the CSS for button hover and delete button hover, so that would be for the hover only. So for that we'll write button hover, delete button hover, and inside we'll set the background color. and we'll set it as variable hover color that we have already defined above. And after that we will add the CSS for input types. So now we'll add the CSS for input types, and this will change the border color of input fields to the primary color when you click on them or tab into them, making it clear when you are typing. So we have the placeholders for the input types, but we'll change the CSS when you will click on that or just tab on that, so they will just have a clear input box. So for that we'll add the CSS that would be input, and the type would be text, and then we have input and the type is equal to number, and for these we'll set the border as 1 pixel and solid, and the color as variable secondary color. And after that we'll set the padding for this, and that would be 10 pixels. And then the border radius, so we'll set the border radius as 5 pixels. And then the margin bottom, and set as 10 pixels. And then the transition, that is border color, it would be 0.3 and ease. So you could see this. Let's refresh it. So let's complete our CSS file, and after these input type focus, and for the text also we'll add one more CSS that would be, or we could just copy from here only. We'll add the focus, and inside we'll set the border color variable, and inside primary color, not the primary color, or you could just set the primary color only. Yeah. And after this we'll set the section background and padding. So for that, so we'll add the styles for several sections of our page, giving them a light background color, padding, and rounded corners for a softer, more organized look. So for that we'll add that. So just see what we'll do. So the classes we have defined in the HTML file, we will use them, and the form control also. For that also we'll add the CSS, so it could have a nice crisp view, and the list items. So for that first we'll set the background color, and we'll set as section background, what we have set earlier. Okay, so section background, and after that we'll add the padding, and padding is 15 pixels. And after that we'll add the border radius and margin bottom, and we'll add the border radius as 8 pixels, and then the margin bottom as 15 pixels. And now we'll add for the typographic enhancement. So this will make the smaller headings and labels stand out by coloring them and making them bold. So let's add the CSS for this. So for h4 and label, that would be the small heading, and the labels will add the color, and that would be the primary color only. And after that we'll add the font weight, that would be bold. Okay, and after this, for the media screen, this will be a responsive design feature. It makes sure that your container box adjusts its size for smaller screens like phone. So the container we have created, for that we'll do the CSS, and for that we'll set the media screen and the max width, and we'll set it as 768 pixels. Okay, and we'll call the container, the whole container, and inside we'll set the width as 90% and padding as 10 pixels. Okay, so this is a CSS file, and let's dispose the previous server and make it live again. So we have added the CSS, and now let's see. First we'll add the JavaScript, and then we'll see what changes we have got in this. So let's start with our JavaScript file, and here we'll add the functionality. So first we'll access all the HTML elements. So for that we will create the constants to get the HTML elements where we show the current balance. So to show the current balance, we have the constant balance variable, and here we'll use document.getElement by id, and that would be balance only. So similarly we will add for the other constants, and now we'll add for the money plus. So that would be what amount we are adding. So money plus, and then we'll add for the money minus. And then for the list, and after that for form, and then text, and then for amount, after that we'll add it for income text and expense text. Expense text. So we have called all the constants, or we have accessed all the HTML elements. So we have grabbed the place where we'll show the total income, that is money plus, and then we have for the spot where we will display the total expenses. So the first one is for the current balance, then we'll show the total income money plus, and then we'll display the total expenses, that would be minus money minus, and then where all the transactions will be shown, that would be the list. And then we have the form element where we enter new transactions, and then we have the text and the text input in the form that is not used in this snippet, and then we have amount. So it is the amount input in the form that is also not used in this snippet, and then we have income text that grabs the input field for entering income, and then we have expense text that is used for the input field where you enter expenses. And now we will work with the local storage. So we have to retrieve any saved transactions from the browser's local storage and converts them from a JSON string back into an array of transaction objects. So for that we'll use the json.parse and use the local storage to get items. So for that we'll write and create const local storage transactions, that would be equal to json.parse, and inside we'll use local storage dot get item, and inside we'll pass transactions. So this will use the local storage. And now we'll create transactions. So if there are any saved transactions in local storage, or if they are, so we can use them, otherwise, or it starts with an empty list. So for that we'll create let and transactions equal to local storage dot get item, and inside we'll pass transactions. And that is not equal to null, and local storage transactions. So this is what we have done. That will check if there are any saved transactions in local storage. If there are, it uses them, otherwise it starts with an empty list. Okay, so now we'll add the transaction functions. So the first function we'll add would be add transaction only. So this function will run when a new transaction is submitted. So we'll create the function here. So function add transaction e dot, and we'll use the prevent default. Okay, and after that we'll use the if else loop for handling income input. That would be, so we have used e.prevent default that stops the form from submitting in the default way, which would reload the page. And then we have the function then checks if the income and expense fields are not empty and creates transaction objects with an ID, description and amount. So if the amount is an income, it's added as a positive number. If it's an expense, it's added as a negative number. So for that we will create that. Inside this function only we'll use the handling income input. So for that we'll write if income dot text dot value dot trim, and that is not equal to null, sorry. So inside we will declare a variable constant income transaction, and that would be equal to, inside we'll give it an ID, generator ID or generate ID, and the text as income, and then amount, that would be plus income text dot value. It will add it to that. We will close it here, and then we'll push the transactions. So transactions dot push, and inside we'll pass the income transaction that we have got the transaction, and then we'll add the transaction DOM, and inside we'll pass the income transaction. Okay, so we have done it for the income input, and similarly we'll do it for the expense input, and for that we'll just copy it and use it similarly for the expense input. So now we'll do it for the expense input. So expense dot text dot value dot trim, and then we have expense transaction, and we have generate ID, and instead of income we'll write the expense, and here we are adding plus income text, we will minus expense text dot value, and here we'll transaction dot push expense transaction, and similarly in the add transaction DOM we will pass the expense transaction. So here now we'll update the values and update the local storage every time. So transactions dot push, it adds the new transaction to the list of transactions, and add transaction DOM, it updates the web page to show the new transaction. And then we have update values that will do, so it will recalculate the balance, total income and total expenses. For that just write update values, and then we'll update the local storage. So that will save the updated list of transactions to the local storage. So we'll write update local storage, and it will update it for that. Okay, and here we have not closed the if, so we'll close it here, and then we'll clear the input fields also. After adding one transaction, we'll clear the input fields. So finally it will clear the input fields, so they are ready for the next transaction entry. So for that we'll write income text dot value, and that would be set it to null after the transaction. And similarly for the expense text value, that too would be set as null after the transaction. And then we'll get the document dot get element by id, and the text dot value. So the text, that is the transaction subject, for that value also, that would be restored to default. Okay, now we'll generate a random id. So this function will create a random number to use as an id for each transaction, ensuring each one is unique. So for the transaction id, we'll generate it. So we'll write a function for that. So we'll create a function and name it as generate id. So for that we'll generate a random transaction id. We'll use the math and floor, and generate a random number, we'll use the random function. So now we will create another function that would be add transaction DOM. So this function adds a new transaction to the web page. So we'll create the function for that, and let's start with it. So function, and we'll name it as add transaction DOM, and inside we'll pass the transaction okay, and inside first we'll create a constant sign, and we'll determine whether to show a minus for expense or a plus for income. So for that we'll write or declare a constant or a variable named as sign. So transaction dot amount, if it's less than 0, then minus, else plus. Okay, so we have defined for the sign, and now we'll create element that will create a new list item for the transactions. So for that we will declare a variable item and use document dot create element. Okay, we'll use the create element, and inside we'll pass the list, and here we will add a class to the item for styling depending on whether it's income or expense. So for that we'll use item dot class list, dot add, and here transaction amount, that would be transaction dot amount, and if it's less than 0 then minus, else plus, and here we will set the HTML inside the list item showing the transaction text, amount, and a delete button. So for that we'll use the item dot inner HTML, that would be equal to, for that we'll write dollar transaction dot text, and we use span here, so first we'll write the sign, then dollar, then we have math.absolute function, and inside we'll pass the transaction amount, so transaction dot amount, and here the span closes, and now we'll move to the button class. So what it's showing, transaction dot text, okay, span started, okay, okay, for in our HTML we have used the backlink or back comma, and here we will create the button class, use the delete button, and we'll set the functioning on click, that is to remove the transaction, and inside we'll pass the transaction dot ID, and here the cross symbol or the X symbol, it will be used to remove the transaction, and now we'll close the button. Now we will append the child or for list and pass the item through it. So we have added the new list item to the transaction list on the page with the list dot append child. So now we will create another function that will update the balance, income, and expenses. So we will create a function and name it as update values. So let's progress with that. We will create a function and name it as update values, and it will create a variable and name it as amounts, and what it will do is it will create an array of all transaction amounts. So for that we have created a variable amounts, and inside we'll write transactions dot map, and inside pass transaction dot amount, and then we will create another variable that would be constant total. So that would be equal to amounts dot reduce. So inside we pass dot item not to fixed, and inside we'll pass to. So we have created an array of all transaction amounts, and then we have created a variable total, and that would be calculate the total balance. And now we will create a variable income and calculate the total expenses. So the three lines will update the web page to show the calculated total income and expenses. So let's create the variable income. And that would be equal to amounts dot filter. Inside we'll pass item. So if item is greater than 0, 43.15. And now we'll use dot reduce, and inside we'll pass count and item, and that would be plus equal to item, and then we'll use a to fixed, and pass it as 2. And now we'll update the balance dot inner text, and that would be equal to $, and inside total, and then money underscore plus dot inner text equal to I think $, income, and then we have money minus dot inner text, and that to equal to $, expense. So these three lines will update the web page to show the calculated total and income and expenses. And now we'll create another function that would be the remove transaction, and inside we'll pass the ID for that. So let's create a function. So function, and we'll name it as remove transaction, and inside we'll pass the ID. So inside this transactions equal to transaction dot filter, and dot ID, and that is not equal to, and after that we'll update the local storage, and use the init function. Okay, and now we'll create the function to update the local storage. So in this, what we have done is we have removed the transaction with the given ID from the list, and we'll save the updated list to the local storage and reinitialize the app to update the UI. Now we'll create a update local storage function. So this function saves the current state of transactions to local storage. So for this, we'll create a function update local storage, and inside we'll use local storage dot set item, and inside we'll pass transactions and JSON dot stingify, and inside we'll pass the transactions. And after updating, we will initialize the app that will reconsider it. So we have converted the transactions array to a JSON string and saved it to the browser's local storage. Now we'll create the init function. So this will initialize the app when it loads or needs to be updated. So for that, we'll create a function init, and inside this we will use list dot inner HTML, and then we'll use transactions for each and pass the add transaction DOM, and then we'll update the values. And here we will call the init function. And now we'll ensure the DOM is fully loaded. So the first, that is list.inner.html, it will clear the transaction list on the web page, and then this transaction for each, it will add each transaction to the web page, and this will update the displayed totals. And now we'll add the event listeners. So first we'll add document dot add event listener, and inside we'll pass doc content loaded, comma function, so inside this we'll add another, that would be form dot add event listener, and inside we will pass submit, comma function e, and inside we'll prevent default. And now we'll call the transaction function, that would be add transaction, and then we'll clear the input fields, that would be income text dot value, that would be equal to, and expense dot text value, we'll close this and this. So The first one, that is document.add event listener. It waits for the web page to load before adding the submit event listener to the form. And this form.add event listener, it adds an event listener to handle form submissions. And e.prevent default, it prevents the default form submission action. And the add transaction function, it calls the function to add a new transaction. And this will clear the input fields for income and expense. And now we'll add another event listener, that would be form.add event listener, and inside we'll pass submit and add transaction. So this will add an event listener to the form for the submit event, calling add transaction when the form is submitted. So here our project is complete and it's showing. So you could see that our project is ready, and you could add any transaction subject. That could be movie, and the amount deducted for movie was $60, and I have pressed the enter, or you could just add transaction and it will automatically move there. And you could add any subject, that could be salary credited, and amount credited could be $4,000. So this is our expense trackers, sorry, $40,000. So with that, we have come to the end of this session for the project of making of expense tracker. If you like this session, please like, share and subscribe. If you have any questions, comment them in the comment section below, and our experts will be happy to help you as soon as possible. Till then, stay safe and keep learning.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.